Chapter 17, Section 2, Enlightenment Ideas Spread. As the Enlightenment ideas spread, what cultural political changes took place? And so we're going to look at the roles of censorship in salons and spreading new ideas, how the Enlightenment affected the arts from painting to music as well as literature, how philosophies influenced enlightened despots, and why the Enlightenment ideas were slow to reach most Europeans. And so if we look at new ideas, one of the things that grows out of the Enlightenment, and again, it's this idea that there are natural laws that apply to all things, whether it be government, economics, physics, society. So what Enlightenment thinkers are looking for is the role of society is to provide justice and happiness. And so by applying science and reason, that's what can happen here on Earth. People can live in a just society and they can achieve happiness here at home on earth before heaven. So it's a big shift from what we were talking about in terms of the Middle Ages. Now, here's the problem. That is a radical shift and a radical change. And it's going to place a couple of key institutions in a pretty rough spot, government and church. And they really don't want to see all this radical change. They want to maintain the status quo, keep things as it is. So this is really going to disrupt everything that they kind of had. So one of the problems that writers run into is the government and the church are going to crack down on anything that seems to be too radical, too crazy, too out there. So what that forces writers to do is to write fiction stories that disguise these Enlightenment ideas. And so that's going to impact the writers and the writings of the times. When we look at how are these ideas spreading, salons play a key critical role. There are these informal social gatherings. It started out as kind of like poetry readings, and so people would meet and gather in these luxurious homes and they would read poetry and discuss what it meant. Sooner or later, what you get is you get Enlightenment ideas become the topic and they debate these things. And then sooner or later, what you get is you get this growing middle class that begins to hobnob with the elites and share their ideas. And so this Enlightenment thinking is going to expand and grow and get out to more people through these salons. So if we look at arts, Baroque style, so that would be the picture on the left, the crucifixion, or the Rising of the Cross by Peter Paul Rubens. They are huge, colorful, full of excitement and all of those types of things and energy and lots of drama kind of involved. And then Rococo on the right, light, elegant, charming. And so you see this woman swinging with a young man down watching. Very different styles of art. When we look at music, music follows kind of the same types of things. It begins with Baroque. It's a little bit choppier. Rococo is a little lighter. And then you also have classical, which would be Mozart. And so when you look at this, ballets and operas, so it's singing that goes along with this. What we start to see during the Enlightenment is that middle class begin to be able to afford to go to these ballets and these operas. And so these things are going to become more available to the middle class. And so Bach, Handel, Haydn, Mozart are some of the famous Enlightenment composers of the time. So if we look at literature, the novel begins to take shape. We talked Cervantes is really the first modern novel, and so what's going to happen over time is that's going to take even more shape. And so modern Western literature is really going to be born in the Enlightenment. So you've got Robinson Crusoe, you've got Pamela, you have Gulliver's Travels, which was shown in the book. So these are all novels that take place during the Enlightenment or are written during the Enlightenment. For enlightened despots, they use their power to bring about. And so the chart down below on the left compares enlightened despots to absolute rulers. I have mixed feelings about how enlightened some of these enlightened despots are. I will say when you talk about all three of these, Frederick II, Catherine the Great, Joseph II, they are reading Enlightenment ideas. They are interacting with Enlightenment writers. Catherine the Great has a lot of letter writing back and forth to some of these Enlightenment thinkers in France. So don't get me wrong, they're exposed to them. But the bottom line is there isn't a radical transformation. They do use their power to begin to make some change. For example, Frederick II reducing torture, freedom of press, freedom of religion. So you'll see this as a pretty common theme. But at the same time, they're not really willing to give up any kind of rule or authority or move away from being an absolutism. There is some difference between them and, for example, Louis XIV. But again, how enlightened they truly are is up for debate. So Catherine the Great, like I said, she does tons of reading, lots of letter writing. She abolishes torture, at least ideally, I guess. She does establish religious toleration. So she is moving in that direction. The problem she runs into is she makes some changes, peasants go too far, and she cracks back down on that. So it goes to show they're not overly enlightened. Joseph II continues reform. Maria Theresa begins it. He continues it. He is by far probably the most enlightened because he attempted to end serfdom. The problem Joseph runs into is as soon as he dies, all of these things get rolled back. So it's pretty short-lived when you look at how things change. The vast majority of people, they live as they had in the past. These changes begin at the top and they slowly trickle their way down to the peasants. It's going to take an awful lot of time before peasants, A, get exposed to Enlightenment ideas, B, are able to do something about it. It's really not until the craziness of the 1800s, the mid-1800s, where there's some radical transformation. And what this painting shows is, again, with Catherine the Great, this is the peasant rebellion that gets put down. And she may have banned torture, but she has a number of these peasants put to death. So it kind of goes to show how reluctant these enlightened despots were to make radical change and transformation.